Robin's singing is gonna put your enemies to sleep forever, and today I'm gonna show you how to build her best. On top, how she stacks up against the likes of Romay, and what's going on with her speed. That and more in this guide. Now let's get into it. Robin is one of those units where a perfect 4-piece for her needs just doesn't really exist. There are some 4-pieces that are usable for certain situations that I will cover, but there's nothing in the realm of the Diver set for Acheron or Emblem set for the Raiden Shogun, to use some of the Genshin terms. So the most universally easy to access set is for you to go for 2-piece Musketeer and 2-piece Prisoner of Deep Confinement. 2-piece attack percent is exactly what Robin craves for, as attack percent is the premier stat that her damage and her buffing scales on, while damage percent only supplies her personal damage. Go for this if you want your Robin to do well in every situation. The next choices heavily depend on what you want to do with her. If you want to max out Robin's personal damage and have a similar buffing capacity compared to the 2-piece attack combo, use Streetwise Boxing. But know that it can take 2 to 3 cycles to max out its passive, as her Concerto doesn't give any stacks. Therefore her normals and getting smacked right in her face are the only ways to earn stacks. And even face tanking isn't that reliable, as her taunt value goes down during Concerto. So the faster you can clear a challenge, the less useful this set becomes, to the point it definitely underperforms compared to her 2-piece combo. On top, it's not efficient in terms of trail-based power to farm, so it's cool if you own the set and your account isn't super high investment to the point that you can just sweep MOC 12 in less than 2 cycles. But in any other case, you can just sit this one out. Watchmaker is an odd one, I give it to you, as Robin doesn't need no break effect, but it will be generally good for any break effect reliant teammates. And the soon to be released Boothill and Firefly heavily profit of it, so make sure to hold on to any good pieces you get, so you have something ready to swap to if you intend to pull for them. The 4-piece Messenger set doesn't offer anything for Robin's personal damage, nor does it help her buffing the team. But if you got speed freaks like Kafka Black Swan in your team, or you run a hyper carry team with Dance on another Harmony unit, you can actually opt for that set, as it can push you above certain beat break points to unlock a nice chunk of damage. The 2-piece also will help you to achieve the 1-to-1 speed on Robin if you are lacking some speed rolls, as you ideally would want to leave the speed moccasins at home for her. Now for planar ornaments, you can definitely roll with a fleet of the Ageless. This and a bunch of other sets give you another big reason to go for 121 speed to make sure you get the full benefits. The 20% HP it serves will beef up your Robin, and more importantly, it gives a team-wide ultra reliable 8% attack buff at all times. If you have it, use it. Broken Keel is a set that doesn't help much with Robin's personal damage, as her Concerto has its own crit damage fixed at 150. However, your crit carries will love it, especially when you play Robin in hyper carry teams where you can stack Broken Keels. And yes, you can absolutely play Robin in such teams and do well, but more to that later. Space Seeding Station is a decent alternative, as it's good for personal damage, but 24% attack distributed through Robin to the team doesn't beat the 8% direct attack buff from Ageless. On top, Robin's burst uptime will be 50% or less, so you're better off going with Fleet or Broken Keel depending on your team's needs. Sprightly Vonback is a situational set. If you know that you take your sweet time to clear the higher floors of the MOC, the 5% extra energy recharge can let your Robin burst slightly more often. It can be the diff in clearing within 5 cycles or not. As for the 40% advance forward it offers, Robin has her own 25% advance forward with her A6, and you need 121 speed so you can guaranteed use this set. So you don't really need the 40% advance forward on top, unless you have still some speed freaks like Kafka overtaking Robin in the first cycle despite having 121 speed. Yes, that actually happened with mine when she ran 161 speed. At 124, my Robin though does beat her again. So as you can see now, it can help in some situations. As for her main stats, the ideal is pretty simple. Get Omega nuclear amounts of attack percent for her, as this is the premier stat that this living jukebox is scaling off. Body, boots and balls, puts them all on attack. You can go physical damage on your balls, which improves her personal damage but does nothing for her buffing, which is not too bad as it actually balances out. The total damage of her IRS team is only very slightly behind compared to using an attack orb. So if you got one or the other, you don't need to feel pressure to change it. As for speed, I mentioned it quite a few times. You want to aim for 121 speed, which gives you two major benefits. One is that it unlocks all the planar ornaments that have 120 speed requirements. And I'm saying 121 as the game rounds up decimals, but under the hood still works with them. So a 120 might not be an actual 120. Aside from that, sometimes speedy units beyond 160 might still overtake her in her first cycle. In that case, go slightly higher with your speed. The other reason is that you need at the very least 117 speed anyway to get 2 actions out of Robin in her first cycle, which allows you to burst in the same cycle. That's because of the 25% advance forward you get from her Ascension 6 at the start of a battle, which lowers the speed you need from 134 to 117. That being said, going a lot above 121 speed like 134 or 143 or even more has just no real benefit for her. To get an additional action in the first cycle, you would need 160 speed or more with Sprightly Vonback. And with her Concerto, this girl for half of the time is just cheerleading from the sidelines, looking pretty and stuff, but doing no action of her own. So it's not worth to sacrifice so many stats for speed that could go into attack instead. For substats, the thing isn't too hard. You get as much attack percent as you can. After that, you get some speed until you cap the 121 speed requirement. And from here on, you can dig into effect rest, defense percent and HP percent. Try to avoid crit as most of her damage comes from her burst, which has a fixed crit rate and crit damage. As for Lightcones, I have here 2 sections. One is focused on raw damage and one that puts energy recharge in mind. Many of you guys out there should pay good attention to the ER cones, as that can be a game changer for you. On the first section, I'll look specifically for the team-wide damage instead of just her personal damage, so therefore my rankings might look different from other people. On a team level, the difference between her cones won't be that big percent-wise, so take it with a pinch of salt. The numbers have been conducted on a premier RS team of Ratio-Topaz, Numpy, Her Majesty herself and Aventurine. With that being said, her signature is of course still number 1. This light cone comes with a chunky 635 base attack, which adds well to her already high base attack. Makes sense as that will come in very tight for her attack buff from Concerto and of course her own personal damage. For every attack your team does, her energy recharge will grow by 3% up to a cap of 15%. And once she triggers her burst, the stacks will be reset and start counting from there immediately again. But don't worry, the stacks will come in flying fast, so she still has it capped for 80 to 90% of the time. On top, the burst will also activate a chunky 48% attack for your team and increases damage dealt by 24% for 1 turn. That's quite juicy. Next in line is Past Self. Of course, it doesn't make much sense to use Ron May's light cone on anyone but her. But let's just roll a second with it. Okay, straight up, the break effect it gives to her will be not that useful. But it gives your whole team a juicy 24% damage increase for 3 turns whenever Robin pops her burst. It also gives a team-wide 10 energy at the start of each wave, which is pretty useful, making this light cone her number 2 choice. The Battle Pass weapon Carves the Moon at S5 comes at rank 3. In crit teams, all of its buffs will come into full use. Attack percent, crit damage or energy recharge, they're all good, especially in dual DPS teams like Topaz and Dr. Ratio. The randomness though of which buff gets applied at a time will make the gameplay a little less predictable. So take this cone's extra layer of gamba with a pinch of salt. And for F2Ps, the S5 Tomorrow's Journey will be the best choice. If it's purely about damage, it gives Robin 32% attack and increases the damage dealt of her ultimate by 30%. These bonuses are enough to make that Lightcone come up confidently at rank 4. Pretty solid. Now, what about Lightcones that also help with energy? Robin is a damn thirsty girl, so we gotta need to do something to help her out. She gets energy whenever anyone in her team attacks aside from her own normal attacks and skill. With that dynamic, you cannot just say like, do a 3 action rotation, skill normal, get hit twice in your face and boom, you got her energy back. She is heavily team reliant as a huge chunk of her humongous 160 energy needs are provided by the team, where every single attack generates 2 energy for her through her talent. So if you want more bursts out of your Robin, then you can use, aside from her signature, Bronya's signature, Memories of the Past, and if you got nothing else, Meshing Cogs. In that order. Just by virtue of using any of these Lightcones, you go down from 38 hits needed with Robin's F2P Lightcone down to 30. Assuming that you don't use an energy rope or Fonback. With a rope, you go down to 17 compared to 25 of the F2P Lightcone. And if you add the one back on top, it's 14 versus 22. That's 37% faster, boys. Now, why is all this waffling important? If you want to use Robin in any team that is not heavily follow-up based, you need to do your best to get the amount of hits needed down, or Robin will just sit there and fiddling thumbs too much. If you are not a notorious 0 or 1 cycler, you want to get your overall damage over multiple cycles up, and these cones can do the trick. It can, for example, allow you to get off another burst in the 3rd cycle, or at the end of the 3rd cycle, pull up all your teammates and finish the challenge where you usually couldn't. Doing that will raise your overall damage floor. You will get the picture better when we talk about the teams. The marketing mainly advertises Robin as a premium support for follow-up teams. And in fact, her kit pushes her mainly in that direction, especially her very particular energy demands. It is definitely the most limiting factor that keeps her tremendous power at bay. But I think if you can't solve that, you got a versatile and capable support at your hands, no cap. She can fit technically everywhere where Tingyun or Ruanmei would also fit. But before we dive into the teams, I'm gonna need to preface my thought process here, so bear with me. I used her F2P Lightcone for the calcs, which doesn't help her at all with energy generation, and then checked what happens in a 3-cycle run. One of my goals was to see how her damage even in the worst case scenario stacks up against Ruanmei for the same teams, and if I can make her clutch out a second burst before the end of the 3rd cycle by making an adjustment to her build. For some teams I made it work and will show you how the damage improves. With that in mind, you can make a similar case for 5 cycles, as that is the requirement for 3 stars. As I said, when I did my calcs, I did low-key map out her worst case scenario. A scenario without any ultimate extensions. Extension means destroying a wave before the burst runs out, which makes its timer reset for more uptime. Imagine a whole nother turn with a fully buffed team all having 1000 to 1400 more attack than usual. So you can expect way more performance in your actual gameplay if you abuse that mechanic. But like I said, I left that out. Why? Her burst uptimes are a bitch to calculate, sorry, and B, it's so variable among all the types of teams and enemies you meet that you can't get a consistent behavior. So take this with another pinch of salt. But at least you will know what you can expect as bare minimum performance. So guys, stay hydrated. While we do that, I will throw tables on the screen that show you the investment levels, team members, speed tuning, etc. And on top we'll highlight the improvements Robin will bring to those teams over certain setups. The tables are calced for MOC 12 over a 3-cycle period. The 5-star units and weapons are set at S0 or S1 at max, 4-star units and weapons at E6 or S5 respectively. This doesn't mean you can't play those teams if you don't own a certain 4-star unit at E6, etc. So see them as recommendations to aim for, not absolutes. Alright, you're still alive? Cool, let's get into it. Like always, the government wants to come for your hard-earned cash. And it's no surprise that Robin brings the biggest improvement to the IRS FUA team, comprised of Ratio-Topaz, Numpy and Aventurine. She will at the worst offer a similar performance to May in this team, raising the team's damage from 1.55 million to 1.61 million. But once we get a second burst off before the 3rd cycle ends, we suddenly jump to 2.1 million damage, making this team now competitive against the likes of Kafka Black Swan with a May and Jingliu Hyper. And note that this still doesn't consider ultimate extensions. You can hopefully see now why energy is such a damn crux on this unit. However, you can get to a second burst really easily just by swapping to a Fonvac or just using a Lightcone that helps with her energy. Easy fix. This team being focused on follow-up attacks will see Robin deal more damage through her ultimate compared to other teams. And on top, will quickly recharge her burst. In general, her whole arsenal of buffs will come into play. Massive attack buffs, damage increase, advanced forwards and her A4. Her A4 can only work for follow-up attacks of her team and increases their crit damage portion by 25%. Not just the mentioned guys, but of course also Clara will benefit as well. Another interesting team to use Robin is with the Space Cancer duo of Black Swan and Kafka. May still remains the best choice, but Robin still achieves 90% of May's performance with the 1 burst performance, which in itself is very impressive. I don't have numbers sadly for the 2 burst performance, so I will ask you to use a little of your imagination. Sorry. But seriously, whoever doesn't own May can find here at least a potent replacement in Robin. Jingliu is very interesting, as this girl gets a lot of attacks off if you use the +1 tech with Bronya. However, despite that, Robin did only achieve 78% of May's performance with 1 burst in 3 cycles and 92% with 2 bursts. So with ultimate extensions in mind, you could at the very best have about the same power, which isn't too shabby considering that May is the best support for Jingliu. So if you don't have May, you can use her there. But if you have her, she will be still the better, more powerful and reliable pick. For Imbibitor Lunae though, you can see more upsides of using Robin compared to Jingliu. His team actually performed better with Robin and reached 88% of May's performance with 1 burst in 3 cycles. My hunch here is that this guy has already a lot of bonus damage in his kit, but is a little thirsty for attack, which Robin provides in spades, unlike Jingliu, who already buffs herself tremendously with attack and has therefore nowhere near the same demand. I don't have numbers for 2 bursts, but I think in the best case, Robin will easily exceed May's performance in that team. I even did try out Robin with Acheron Welt. It's an iffy team, I give you that, as Welt is an imposter sustain. But I can see a world with a healer 5-star Pella on the horizon, and in such a team, Robin could actually do fairly decent. In the Acheron Welt combo, she did achieve 85% of the damage, replacing Sparkle with a single burst in 3 cycles. I don't have the 2 numbers here either, but I expect about similar performance or slightly more once you do manage to get that, especially with old extensions. On a side note, I can see teams that rely on frequent breaks also to have some benefits with Robin, as her advanced forward from her burst allows them to move more often, even if it's not by that much. This will be interesting to see play out with Boothill and Firefly. Add a Bronya on top and voila, lots of breaks. The only guy that has to sit out this time is Blade, as he really doesn't like Robin's attack buffs at all. Sorry Baldy. Now, regarding sustains, I think Robin is not too greedy on skill points, but she is still less efficient than Atinium. So if you want to be able to use her skill more than the absolute necessary to get her burst off, you really want to look into sustains that are very efficient like Luocha, Fushuan or Galaga for example. For the Iris team, you want to use Aventurine if you have him. Okay, now let's have a look at Robin's traces for those of you who want a little refresher. The normal attacks of her you can ignore. They don't add anything outside of generating skill points, so no need to level them. Her skill, Pinion Area, though, is a very strong, giving her whole team a 50% increase to the damage dealt at level 10 to the entire team. Yep, it's a Tingyun Great ultimate, but for everyone minus the energy. Holy crap. This thing has a 3-turn uptime that is tied to Robin's turns. So with her being relatively slow compared to the team, you do have a lot of uptime with that thing. So you will do skill normal for her rotation. But as long as you have enough skill points to boot, there's no harm in using it again if it helps you to top up her 160 energy faster. Her ultimate Vox Harmonique Opus Cosmique is very unique. As mentioned, it asks you a lot with that 160 energy demand. This certainly balances out all the massive power she brings to the table and shapes her niche. But luckily, I covered some of the tricks already you can do to alleviate her thirst for energy. Now let's unpack the goodies. The burst lets you enter the Concerto state, which gives your entire team a crazy amount of attack and lets the other 3 goons in your team all advance forward by 100%. The attack buff we are talking here gives about 1000 to 1400 flat, no questions asked, to every single guy in your team, including Robin. It scales with almost 23% of Robin's total attack plus 200, which is the reason you want to stack nuclear amounts of attack on her. Get as much as possible, even if you have to steal some. On top, she will also turn herself into an automatic attack cannon, doing coordinated attacks for every single attack that your team member performs. You will see therefore a white damage number pop up on top of whoever does damage in your team. It works on basically everything. Skills, bursts, normals, and of course follow-up attacks. Okay, I lied, it's not everything. Damage that comes from DOTs won't work. Environmental damage, items, emotional damage, or your mama's slippers, they all don't work. It has to come straight from the character. This damage works similar to Tingyun's benediction and scales with her attack and has a fixed crit rate of 100% and a fixed crit damage of 150%. So regardless of your build, it stays always the same. That's the reason you don't want to get any crit stats on her relics if you can avoid it. The only time where it increases is through her Eidolons 6. During her party time, where she cheerleads for your team, she cannot get crowd control at all. And for the whole duration of her Concerto, Robin cannot take any actions. It is as if she got removed from the field, and exactly for that reason you have to make sure that her skill has at least 1 stack before you go into her burst. Otherwise you high-key gimp yourself. By the way, when she pulls her burst, she also starts singing for some weird reason. And instead of her pretty face, you now see a special icon on the action bar. That icon is like an extra team member that has its own speed of 90. It doesn't matter what speed Robin runs, the countdown cannot be influenced by anything, not by her or others. Once that icon reaches the top of the action bar, the Concerto state just ends and Robin will stop her singing and pop back into existence, getting a turn right away. During Concerto, your team will be able to do about 2 actions per member, and if a wave gets destroyed before the countdown reaches the top, it will be reset and start its run again from the bottom, giving your whole team another full action. Means if you can deal with waves swiftly, you get rewarded with more Concerto uptime, which will be very cool in pure fiction. But you can also abuse this in MOC. Speaking of the MOC, the best time to pop the ultimate is right at the start of a new wave or towards the end of a cycle. The earlier you use the ultimate, the sooner you have it up again. And if you use it at the end of a cycle, you can pull your characters back into the current cycle. And if you then manage on top to kill all these enemies, you get also a Concerto extension as a bonus. So it gets even better. This is definitely great for 1 and 0 cyclers, but it also benefits regular players to clutch a dub from the jaws of defeat. Her talent, Tonal Resonance, is a major cornerstone of her kit. Without it, this unit's kit would collapse. It gives 20% crit damage at level 10, which is very nice, but the main draw is the 2 energy it provides to Robin whenever somebody does an attack in the team. This is what supplies her the whole time. Virtually half of all of her 160 energy need is covered by this talent, and this is exactly the biggest factor that pushes the character towards follow-up teams, as they just get more attacks out than anybody else. But outside of follow-up teams, Jingliu Bronya and similar teams that can attack frequently can also get pretty close to the number of attacks needed. Her technique, Overture of Inebriation, adds also some relief and should always be used for big battles. It creates outside a field that turns smaller enemies into her personal sims, and instead of attacking, they just start following her around. If these dogs had Twitch Prime memberships, they would probably throw that at her too. The effect lasts 15 seconds before the buyer's regret kicks in and they return to normal. Now, once you enter battle, Robin will regenerate 5 energy with the start of every new wave. Really strong once again for pure fiction, but it will also be pretty cool for MOC. The Ascension 2 gives you 25% advance forward on your first cycle. It is the reason you only need 117 speed as the bare minimum to get your 2 actions on the first cycle instead of the regular 134. And it is a necessity if you want her to go in front of your team members. But to be sure, you even beat speed freaks like Kafka who zoom at 160, you go a little above 120. Ascension 4 is what gives Robin another edge towards 4 teams, raising their crit damage dealt of follow-up attacks by 25%. And Ascension 6 gives a slight aid to Robin's energy needs, adding a 5 energy to every single skill cast of hers. In terms of raw damage, E1 will be about similar strength to the S1. I did my comparison based on the IRS team. However, the weapon gives you on top of the damage 15% energy recharge, which are getting ramped up over 5 stacks really quickly with every attack from your team. It has about 80 to 90% uptime considering the reset from the burst. The E1 will drop enemy resistances by 24%. So if you want to open Robin to more teams reliably, plus damage, go for the light cone as it will help you to get there. If you only care for her current team's performance, then E1 will get you further. And of course, if you pull for both, you will get more damage from both things and be flexible on top. But as always, it is not necessary to pull these. You can still play Robin without them. You will just need to work a little more for the team flexibility. Now, with the E1 out of the way, let's talk the others. E2 is massive. The 16% speed increase is nice, but not the main attraction though. It's the fact that the talent produces now 3 energy instead of 2 per attack. This makes Robin just a lot more accessible to other teams like regular crit based teams who would be considered maybe too slow before or just put more strain on your builds. What I do like about this is that it makes it significantly more reliable to pull a second ultimate before you end your 3rd cycle, for example. E3 will raise your skill and ultimate by 2. This is your stopping point. For the next big con, you would have to go all the way to E6. E4 removes crowd control from your team whenever Robin uses her burst. On top, you get 50% effect rest. This is some quality of life, but for real, it's not that exciting. E5 raises your talent and basic attack by 2 and 1 respectively, also not very exciting. E6 is, as to be expected of an Eidolon that you need to sell your family to get, is pretty big. It adds a whopping 450% crit damage on top of the fixed 150% you have on your ultimate, making each of her coordinated attacks like little nukes for up to 8 times. Robin comes out of the gate pretty decently. She carved her own niche in follow-up teams, with her IRS team being the premier one. And she is a decent enough alternative for Ron May in Kafka Black Swan. For every other team, energy is a major constraint that can be overcome with the right builds, but it needs more experience from the players to handle her right. If you do have the knowledge and the tools, you can definitely smash with her. Ron May certainly isn't in any danger anytime, but instead you have now 2 of them. where one of them is a little special needs but still very good. Have fun, this has been Neostar Impact. Peace.